My parents left me out of the family vacation group chat, then told me, "Your brother needed a break more than you." I said nothing and stayed home. A month later, my sister opened social media and found me smiling in front of the place they'd spent years telling me I'd never reach. My name is Ethan. I'm 31. I work IT support at a mid-sized logistics company for $52,000 a year, which is what my family knows. What they don't know is that I also freelance. Web development, database management, small contracts for small businesses who found me on Upwork and kept coming back. Nights and weekends. 5 years of nights and weekends. The savings account they don't know about has $67,000 in it. But I'll get to that. First, the past. I need to explain how a family decides, collectively and with full awareness, to leave one person out of a vacation and then lie about it. Because it doesn't happen in one meeting. It happens over decades. Small cuts. Tiny exclusions. A pattern so gradual you don't see the shape until someone holds up the picture and says, "That's you. You're the one not in it." Connor is my brother. 28. He has always been the son my parents talk about at dinner parties. Not because he's accomplished anything specific. Because he's comfortable. He walks into rooms like he was expected. Smiles easily. Laughs at the right moments. Has the kind of presence that makes mothers relax and fathers nod. My mother once said, at a Thanksgiving table with 9 people sitting right there, "Connor just has that thing where people want to be around him." I was 2 chairs away eating stuffing. I didn't have that thing. I had a fork and a plate and the quiet understanding that my mother had just described my brother's personality as a gift and mine as a gap. But Connor wasn't always the only version of a son my mother could see. When I was 12 and had my tonsils out, Connor was 9 and terrified of hospitals. Wouldn't visit. My mother stayed home with him. My father dropped me off and picked me up. But the night before the surgery, Connor drew me a card. Marker on printer paper. A stick figure in a hospital bed with a speech bubble that said, "You're the bravest." Misspelled. He slid it under my door at 10 p.m. I still have it. The kid who drew that card and the man who sat in a group chat while his parents planned my exclusion are the same person. I keep those 2 versions of him in my head, and neither one cancels the other out. The pattern started with celebrations. When Connor graduated high school, my parents threw a backyard party. Tent. DJ. Catered taco bar from a place called Soul Brothers that charges $28 per person. 40 guests. $3,200 total. I know because my father left the invoice on the kitchen counter, and I saw it while making coffee the next morning. When I graduated 2 years earlier, my mother made a lasagna, the kind from a box with the powder cheese packet, and my father said, "Good job, bud," from the couch without standing up. He was watching a Tigers game. They lost. He seemed more bothered by that than inspired by my diploma. When Connor got into college, my parents took the whole family to the Caribbean. Punta Cana. For nights. All-inclusive resort called Breathless. $8,400. I remember because my mother talked about it for 3 months beforehand, like she was planning a moon landing. Matching luggage. New swimsuits for everyone. A group photo at the airport that she framed and put on the living room wall. That photo is still there, by the way. 5 smiling people in front of a departure board. I'm in it. I was 16. That was the last family photo that included me, where everyone seemed to remember I was there. When I got my trade certification in IT support 2 years later, the CompTIA A+ and Network Plus, 6 months of studying after work, 2 exams, $2,200 in fees I paid myself, my mother said, "That's great, honey," and in the same breath asked if I could look at her email, because she was getting spam from a mattress company. Nobody offered to pay. Nobody mentioned a dinner. The certification sits in a frame on my desk at work. Derek has asked about it once, for years ago. He said, "Is that hard to get?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Good for you." That's more than my parents ever said about it. The financial pattern runs deeper than celebrations. When Connor needed a car at 21, my parents co-signed a lease on a Honda Civic. $289 per month. When Connor stopped making payments after 5 months, they absorbed it. $1,734. When I needed a car at 19, my father said, "Figure it out." I bought a 2004 Corolla with 140,000 miles for $3,800 from a guy named Dennis who ran an auto shop out of his garage. That car lasted me 7 years. I figured it out. When Connor's apartment deposit came due, parents covered it. $1,400. When Paige needed first and last month's rent in the city, parents covered it. $2,600. When I moved into my apartment, I paid my own deposit, $1,100, and my mother said, "See, you've always been independent." She said it like it was a personality trait. It wasn't. It was a survival mechanism created by the fact that nobody was coming to help. I want to be precise about the freelancing because it matters for what comes later. I started freelancing 5 years ago after a guy at a coffee shop asked if I could build him a website for his landscaping business. $800. I said yes. Built it in 2 weekends. He referred me to his brother, who runs a plumbing company. $1,200. The brother referred me to a dentist. $2,000. It grew. Slowly. Nights after work. Weekends. I taught myself React, WordPress custom themes, basic database architecture. My rate went from $30 per hour to $75 per hour over 4 years. Last year, freelance income, $38,000. Combined with my day job, $90,000. My family thinks I make $52,000 and lives in a small apartment because I'm the struggling one. I live in a small apartment because I'm the saving one. The difference is $67,000 in a savings account at a credit union they don't know exists. The present. 3 months ago, my mother called on a Sunday. iPad trouble. Apple ID password again. This happens every 6 weeks. I drive 20 minutes, sit at her kitchen counter, and fix something a 3-minute YouTube video could explain. I don't mind. Or I didn't. I sat at the counter. iPad open. Reset the password. She went to make tea, the kind she buys from a store on Main Street that charges $14 for a box of 12 bags, which is a detail that matters when you're the son paying $600 a month toward a mortgage your mother claims she can barely cover. The iPad synced and notifications rolled in. A group chat, titled Summer Trip. 6 members. Vivian, Gerald, Connor, Connor's wife, Paige, Troy. 6 names. I counted them twice because the first time I thought I'd missed my own. I hadn't. Not 7. 6. I scrolled up. The chat was 4 weeks old. The first message was from my mother, dated May 3rd. "Okay, I found the perfect Airbnb in Lisbon. Look at this kitchen." She used 3 exclamation points. My mother has never used 3 exclamation points about anything I've done. Flight comparisons for 6 passengers. Airbnb links in Lisbon with screenshots of the terrace view. Restaurant recommendations from a food blog my sister follows. Packing lists. My mother had a list. My sister had a list. Connor's wife had a list that included a specific sunscreen brand that costs $42 and a hat from a store I'd never heard of. They'd been planning for a month. A detailed, enthusiastic, logistically organized month. Without me. Then the message. 12 days into the chat, my sister Paige wrote at 9:14 p.m., "Should we tell Ethan?" My mother's reply, 11 minutes later at 9:25 p.m., "He'll only make it awkward. Last trip, he barely talked to anyone." My father, for minutes after that, 9:29 p.m., "Just say we're not doing a trip this year." 3 people. 3 messages. 16 minutes. 1 decision. My sister asked. My parents answered. The vote was unanimous. Tell him nothing. Let him believe the lie. And move on to packing lists and sunscreen brands. I put the iPad down. Finished the password reset. My mother came back with tea in a mug that had a chip on the handle I'd noticed 3 years ago, and she still hadn't replaced. I said, "All fixed." She said, "You're a lifesaver, sweetie." I drove home. Didn't say a word about the chat. Didn't cry. Didn't call anyone. Drove home, sat on my couch, and stared at the wall behind my TV for about 40 minutes. The wall has a small crack near the ceiling I've been meaning to spackle. I stared at the crack and thought about the word awkward and what it means when your mother uses it to describe you to the family members who agreed. The past, because you need to understand the money. 3 years ago, my parents sat me down in their living room. The couch still had the plastic wrap on the corners from when they bought it in 2019, which my mother has never removed because she's protecting the fabric, a phrase that makes me want to scream into a pillow, but that's a different conversation. They said they were struggling with the mortgage. $2,100 a month. Gerald's warehouse hours had been cut from 40 to 32. Vivian works part-time at a dermatology clinic doing reception, $17.50 per hour, 24 hours a week. They asked if I could help. I said yes. $600 a month. Automatic transfer. First of every month. 3 years. 36 payments. $21,600. I set up the auto transfer on my phone in the living room while my mother made tea and my father watched a baseball game with the volume too low to hear and too high to ignore. Connor sends nothing. Has never been asked. I know this because I asked my mother once, during year 2, if Connor was helping. She said, "Connor's got his own expenses, you know how it is." His expenses included a lease on a car he couldn't afford and a gym membership at a place that charges $89 per month, both of which I learned about from Leah. Paige sends nothing. Has never been asked. I am the only child who contributes to the household budget, and I'm the child who doesn't get included in the household vacation. I did the math one night, sitting at my kitchen table with a calculator app open and a feeling in my chest I couldn't name. My mother's estimated share of the Portugal trip, split between the 4 paying adults, roughly $2,400. My monthly payment to their mortgage, $600. For months of my money. The woman who told 3 relatives 3 different lies about why I wasn't in Portugal funded her portion of the trip with 4 months of transfers from the son she left out of the group chat. I sat with that calculation for a while. Made a pot of coffee. Didn't pour a cup. Just listened to the machine drip and drip and drip. 2 years ago, I was briefly engaged. Renee? It didn't work out. Details aren't part of this story except for one. My parents had promised to contribute $5,000 toward the wedding. When the engagement ended, I never asked for the money. Grief has a way of making you forget things you're owed because you're too busy surviving things you didn't deserve. Last Christmas, I overheard my mother on the phone in the kitchen mention the Portugal fund. The $5,000 they'd promised for my wedding, the wedding that already broke me once, was redirected to the vacation that broke me again. They funded my exclusion with money they owed me for a life event that didn't survive. 2 heartbreaks, same $5,000. The present. The passport. I remembered something from 4 months before the iPad. A Tuesday dinner at my parents' house. Pot roast. The kind Gerald makes from a recipe he's been using since 1998 that involves too much onion and not enough salt, but nobody corrects because correcting Gerald about his pot roast is apparently a higher risk activity than co-signing Connor's car lease. My mother was at the stove, stirring gravy, and she said casually, without looking at me, "Is your passport still valid?" I said no, expired last year. She said, "You should renew that sometime." Went back to stirring. Didn't mention it again. Didn't offer to help. Didn't suggest we go together. Just filed the information and moved on to gravy. For months later, she booked an international trip for 6 people. 6 passports renewed. Mine, the one she confirmed was expired over pot roast, was the only one left in a drawer. She asked the question so she'd know the answer. It wasn't care. It was a perimeter check. She was making sure the fence had no gaps before she built the yard she didn't want me in. They picked Portugal because they knew I couldn't follow even if I found out. An international destination with a 6-week lead time, and the one son they excluded happened to have an expired passport they'd verified 4 months earlier. That's not coincidence. That's logistics. They were wrong about one thing. They thought the expired passport was a wall. It was a door. I just needed $189 and 48 hours to open it. Tuesday morning. Post office on Grant Street. 9:15 a.m. Expedited passport processing. $189 total, $60 for the application, $129 for expedited service, paid with a debit card from the credit union my family doesn't know exists. The clerk was a woman named Patrice with reading glasses on a beaded chain and a rubber stamp that hit the counter like a judge's gavel. She looked at my photo, looked at my face, squinted, adjusted her glasses, and said, "Somewhere good." I said, "Somewhere better." She stamped it and slid the receipt across the counter without another word. Patrice understood. I don't know how, but she did. Picked it up 48 hours later. Thursday. Same post office. Same counter. Patrice wasn't there, but the stamp mark was dry and the passport was real. Blue cover. Gold lettering. United States of America. Valid for 10 years. I held it in the parking lot for about 30 seconds. The document my family thought would keep me on the ground. I put it in my jacket pocket and drove to work with the window down even though it was 51 degrees and my heat was on, which made no practical sense, but felt correct. At work, I submitted a PTO request for 2 weeks. Derek, my boss, who wears the same gray New Balance 574 sneakers every single day regardless of season, weather, corporate events, or the silent judgment of the HR department. Looked at the request form over his lunch, which was a protein bar he'd been eating for 40 minutes because Derek eats protein bars the way normal people read novels, slowly and with deep commitment. He said, "You've never taken more than 3 days off. Everything okay?" I said, "Family situation." He approved it in 4 seconds. Didn't ask more. The first person to register that I was doing something different for myself was a man who has never once asked my middle name in 6 years of sharing a wall. That's not a criticism of Derek. That's a criticism of everyone who should have asked and didn't. That night, 11 p.m., my apartment. Couch. Leftover rigatoni from 2 days ago. Room temperature. Eaten directly from the pot because dishes felt like a commitment I wasn't prepared to make. I opened my laptop, balanced it on a throw pillow, and booked a trip to the Maldives. Overwater villa at a resort I'd been reading about for 2 weeks. 47 reviews studied. 6 resorts compared. Drone footage watched. Tide schedules analyzed for the bioluminescent plankton that glows in the shallows at night. 5 nights. $4,200 accommodation. Business class flights through Dubai. $3,800. Resort transfers, meal plan, 1 snorkeling excursion, and a sunset photography session. $1,400. Total, $9,400. More than the entire family's Portugal trip for 6 people. I booked it between bites of cold pasta in my underwear on a Tuesday night, which is apparently how you planned the most significant financial decision of your life. The confirmation email arrived at 11:47 p.m. while I was washing the pot. I read it with wet hands and soap on my wrist. Didn't celebrate. Didn't call anyone. Just confirmed the email, dried my hands, and went to bed. The laptop stayed open on the couch. The confirmation glowed on the screen in the dark apartment like a small blue promise. While I was quietly planning, the family posted from Portugal. Connor on a balcony in Lisbon. Wine glass in one hand, phone in the other. Caption, taking time for what matters. 14 likes from his friend group. Page at sunset over the Tagus River, Troy's arm around her waist, both of them backlit like they were in a cologne ad. My mother was tagged in every photo. Smiling. Hair done. Wearing a scarf I'd never seen, which means she bought it for the trip, which means she spent money on trip accessories for a vacation funded partly by the $600 I send monthly and the $5,000 they owed me for a wedding that didn't happen. I counted the photos because that's what I do now. 14 photos over 6 days. Group dinners at restaurants with tile walls and wine lists. Cobblestone streets. My father holding a pastel de nata in front of a bakery like he'd invented pastry. Connor and his wife doing a couple's pose on a bridge. Paige and Troy at a vineyard. A family selfie at a lookout point. 6 faces, all accounted for. 14 photos. 0 mentions of my name. Not a wish you were here. Not a tag. Not an emoji. Not even a notification that suggested someone had typed my name and deleted it. I was erased so thoroughly that a stranger looking at the feed would assume Vivian and Gerald had 2 children and a nice son-in-law. I wasn't missing from the photos. I was missing from the concept. The idea of the family they posted didn't include a 3rd child. It never had. Day 4 of Portugal, my mother texted me privately. Separate from the group chat, obviously, because the group chat is where real information lived and the private text is where she performed. Hey sweetie, hope you're doing well. Miss you. 1 exclamation point. 1 lie. She was standing on a Lisbon balcony with the 5 people she chose over me and typed miss you with the same fingers that typed he'll only make it awkward. I read the text. Screenshot it. Didn't reply. The screenshot went into a folder on my phone I'd started keeping labeled receipts. 11 entries now. Text messages, group chat screenshots, a photo of the browser history, a photo of the 3 renewed passports in the drawer. I don't know what I'll do with the folder. I just know it grows. The Maldives. Day 1. I landed at 2:40 p.m. local time. Mail International Airport. The terminal smelled like sea salt and jet fuel and sunscreen from the tourists ahead of me in the customs line. The airport is on an island so small you can see both coastlines from the runway. You take a speedboat to the resort. 20 minutes across water that was a color I'd only seen in screensavers. Turquoise. Not metaphorically. Actually, literally turquoise, like someone had photoshopped the ocean and forgot to tone it down. The boat driver was a guy named Rashid who pointed out dolphins on the way and seemed genuinely delighted every time one jumped, which was every 30 seconds, like he was seeing them for the first time, even though he makes this trip 8 times a day. A staff member offered me a cold towel and a glass of something with mango and passion fruit. I took both. My hands were shaking slightly. Not cold. Not excited. Something I didn't have a word for. 31 years of spending every dollar on bills, certifications, mortgages that weren't mine, and iPad fixes, and this was the first time money left my account and came back as something I could feel on my skin. The overwater villa had a glass floor panel in the living room. Fish swam beneath my feet while I brushed my teeth the first morning. I stood there, toothbrush hanging from my mouth, watching a parrotfish navigate coral underneath my bathroom, and started laughing. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. I'm a guy who eats cold rigatoni from the pot and fixes his mother's Apple ID every 6 weeks, and I'm watching fish through my floor. The disconnect between who my family thinks I am and where I was standing was so wide I could have parked a speedboat in it. I didn't post for 3 days. Lived the trip. Snorkeled a reef that looked like someone had hired an interior designer for the ocean. Ate grilled mahi-mahi on the deck while the sun dropped into the water like it had an appointment. Read a book I'd been carrying in my bag for 2 years, a paperback about a guy who walks across Spain, the kind of book you buy at an airport and carry everywhere as a promise you'll eventually sit still long enough to read it. I read it in 2 days. On the 3rd night, I walked to the shore after dark and the shallow water was glowing. Bioluminescent plankton. Blue-green light in every ripple, every footstep, every wave. I stood there barefoot for 20 minutes. The sand was warm from the day. The water was cool. The sky had more stars than I'd ever seen because there are no cities for hundreds of miles. Nobody on Earth knew where I was except Rashid and a parrotfish. Day 4. Sunset. I asked a resort photographer to take one photo. Me on the deck. Ocean behind me. Sun going down. Wearing a linen shirt I bought at the resort shop because I didn't pack anything that matched where I was, which is a metaphor I didn't intend. I looked at the photo on the camera screen. I didn't look happy. I looked calm. I posted it at 9:47 p.m. Maldives time. 1:47 p.m. back home. Peak scrolling hours. Geotag, Maldives. No caption. Just the photo. I put the phone down on the deck railing and went inside and poured a glass of water and drank it slowly. I wasn't nervous. I was aware. There's a difference. Paige found it first. She was on her lunch break at the marketing agency where she works. Scrolled past 3 ads, 2 recipe reels, and a video of someone's golden retriever. Then stopped. Her brother. Standing on water. Maldives geotag. 847 likes already from my network, co-workers, freelance clients, people from the part of my life my family has never visited because they've never asked. She screenshot it. Sent it to the group chat. The one I was never in. Her message. Did anyone know about this? My mother replied in 11 seconds. 11. Leah timed it. What is that? No question mark. Just incomprehension. My father. 30 seconds later. Where did he get the money for that? Not that looks amazing. Not good for him. Where did he get the money? The first question from a man who received $21,600 from me was about whether my spending interfered with his receiving. Connor didn't reply for 6 hours. One word, wow. 6 hours to produce 1 syllable. The comments came in. Not from family. From everyone else. Co-workers I barely talked to. Freelance clients whose websites I built at 1 a.m. Old classmates. Living the dream, bro. You deserve this, man. Ethan, where has this been hiding? 47 comments from people who celebrated me without being asked, without needing a group chat to coordinate it. My mother read every single one. Leah told me she refreshed the post every 20 minutes for 3 hours. 47 strangers told her son he deserved good things. She never had. Then my father called. First direct call in 2 months. He didn't say congratulations. Didn't say it looks beautiful. Didn't ask if the water was really that color. He said, how are you affording this when you can barely keep up with helping us? I was standing on the deck. The sky had gone purple. The ocean was louder at night, which nobody tells you. I said, I stopped the $600 last month. You'll notice next billing cycle. 8 seconds of silence. I counted. I count everything now. You can't just stop that. Watch me. I hung up. Put the phone face down on the railing. The wood was warm under my feet. The air smelled like salt and plumeria. My father's voice was still in my ear, and it wasn't asking about his son. It was asking about $600. That's the sound a family makes when they've confused a person with a payment plan. Nana Ruth saw the photo because Leah shared it. She's 81. She uses Facebook carefully, slowly, occasionally finding something that changes everything. She called me directly. Her voice sounds like someone speaking through warm wool. She said, "Your mother told me you couldn't come to Portugal because of work." I said, "She told me they weren't taking a trip this year." Silence. Just her breathing. The sound of a woman hearing what her daughter has become. "I'm going to call your mother now." She did. 45 minutes. I don't know what was said, but my mother didn't post on social media for 2 weeks afterward. Nana Ruth doesn't yell. She lowers her voice. And when she lowers it, people listen the way you listen when the room goes quiet and someone important walks in. She did. 45 minutes. I don't know what was said, but my mother didn't post on social media for 2 weeks after. Nana Ruth doesn't raise her voice. She lowers it. And when she lowers it, people listen the way you listen to thunder that's getting closer. The truth about Connor came through Leah on a Thursday night. 11 p.m. She can't help herself. She texted, "You should know. Connor didn't need a break from work. He got fired 2 months before Portugal." Fired. From the sales job my father's friend arranged at a medical equipment company. $95,000 salary. The kind of job you don't lose unless you really work at losing it. Leah didn't have the full story, but she had enough. Missed targets for 3 consecutive quarters, a written warning in March, a final warning in April, and a termination in May. The Portugal trip was booked in June. My parents knew. They funded Connor's share, roughly $1,800, because he had no income. The break my brother needed wasn't from stress. It was from the consequences of his own failure. The family vacation wasn't rest. It was a cover story. A 6-person production designed to make the golden child feel golden for 1 more week. They excluded me not because I didn't need a break. Because my presence, employed, stable, freelancing on the side, sending $600 a month to the house they were quietly propping Connor up from, would have made the comparison impossible to avoid. 2 brothers at the same breakfast table. One with a job, one without. One paying the family mortgage. One being paid for by the family. They didn't want that math visible. My exclusion wasn't about me being awkward at dinner. It was about Connor not being able to sit across from the brother who had everything he'd lost. They didn't leave me out because I didn't matter. They left me out because I mattered too much in the wrong direction. First month without the $600, nothing. Silence. Like it didn't happen. I wondered if they'd even noticed. Second month, my father called. Different tone. The practical voice he uses when he's calling about money but pretending it's social. 15 seconds of "how's work" before the pivot. He said the mortgage was due and they were $600 short. I said, I thought the family was doing well enough for a $7,200 vacation. He said, "That's different." I said, "How?" 12 seconds of silence. I counted. He didn't answer. The parents who could afford Portugal for 6 cannot cover their mortgage without the son they didn't invite. I didn't offer to restart the payments. Didn't fill the silence with an explanation. Just let it sit on the phone line between us like a piece of furniture neither of us wanted to move, but both of us could see. Leah sent me 3 screenshots over the following week. Private messages my mother sent to 3 different relatives explaining why I wasn't in Portugal. Version 1. To Aunt Carol. Ethan had a work conflict. He couldn't get the time off. Version 2. To Uncle Pete. He said he didn't want to come. You know how he is. Version 3. To Nana Ruth's neighbor Doris. We offered, and he turned us down. He prefers being alone. 3 stories. 3 lies. None matching. My mother built 3 separate fictions for 3 separate audiences, and none of them included the truth, which was that she created a group chat, left out one son, confirmed his passport was expired, picked an international destination, told him there was no trip, and used his money to pay for it. Leah sent all 3 with the message, "I'm sorry, but you need to see this." She always apologizes before she sends me things that change how I see my family. I believe the apologies. I also believe the screenshots. 6 months passed. 6 months of Tuesdays. 6 months of the first of the month arriving without a $600 transfer and nobody calling to thank me for stopping because nobody had ever called to thank me for sending it. 6 months of my mother's calls tapering from weekly to bi-weekly to monthly to nothing, which tracked because the calls were never about me. They were about what I could do, and once the doing stopped, so did the dial tone. 6 months of Connor not texting, which was mathematically identical to before, except now I measured the gap instead of explaining it away as busy schedules. He wasn't busy. He was unemployed. He just didn't text. I started seeing someone in the fall. Met her at a bookstore. She was reading the same book I'd finished in the Maldives, the one about walking across Spain, which is either a coincidence or the universe has a sense of humor I'm not equipped to evaluate. She splits the bill, asks questions, and listens to the full answers. Noticed my passport on the desk the third time she came over and asked where I went. I told her. She said, "Good for you," and meant it. Didn't ask how much it cost. Didn't ask why I went alone. Just said it and moved on to the next thing. That's all I'll say about her, because she's not a character in a story. She's a person. Derek got promoted. Took me to lunch to celebrate. Ordered 2 sandwiches and ate both of them, which is Derek's signature move and which nobody has ever questioned because Derek earned those sandwiches through 6 years of silent competence and gray New Balance loyalty. He said, "You seem different lately." I said, "I went on a trip." He said, "Must have been a good one." Went back to his second sandwich. Derek doesn't need the story. He just noticed the change. That's enough from Derek. I found my passport in a desk drawer last week. I was looking for a charging cable. Opened the drawer. There it was. Blue cover. 1 stamp. Maldives. Blue ink pressed into a cream-colored page. I opened it and looked at the stamp the way you look at a receipt for something you're glad you bought. Not the thing itself, just the proof that you did it. That you were there. That the version of you who ate cold rigatoni from the pot and sent $600 a month to people who didn't invite him to dinner is also the version who stood above the Indian Ocean and didn't check his phone for 3 days. I opened my laptop. Started browsing flights. Not to prove anything. Not to post anything. Not to make anyone stare at a group chat and type, "What is that?" Just because the passport works now, and so do I. I bookmarked 3 destinations. Didn't book yet. The tab stayed open. I closed the laptop and the little blue light stayed on in the dark room like a promise I made to myself that I don't have to keep right now, but will keep eventually. Last week, I created a group chat. My 2 close friends, Marcus and John. Derek, who said yes before he finished his protein bar. The woman I've been seeing, who typed absolutely, with a period at the end, because she's the kind of person who uses periods in text messages and means every one of them. I named the chat New Year's Trip. Sent the first message at 7:30 p.m. on a Wednesday. Who's in? For replies in 12 minutes. All yes. No one asked anyone else if someone should be excluded. No one voted. No one checked anyone's passport before deciding the destination. No one created a separate thread to discuss whether someone might make it awkward. For people said yes in 12 minutes, because that's what people do when the invitation is genuine and the person sending it has never lied to them about whether a trip exists. I stared at the screen for a while. The group chat glowed on my phone. 5 names, including mine. 6 months ago, I was the name discussed and voted out. A passport confirmed expired over pot roast. A chair removed before the table was set. A son who sent $600 a month and got an exclamation point from Lisbon in return. Now I built a chat where everyone was invited. Where nobody was voted out. Where the only requirement for being included was wanting to come. Nobody's passport was checked. Nobody was voted out. That's the whole difference. Anyway, that's the whole thing. If you made it this far, appreciate you. Subscribe, leave a comment if you want. I'll be back.